It's actually, Bruce, I was counting. There's like 4 of the 3D gimmicks in that one. See, we had a little conversation before. We wanted to make sure we had everybody review their clips, and it was quite funny as everybody was pointing out all the paddleball, gimmick and Monsters vs. Aliens. We're kind of trying to keep count now of who does the 3D gimmicks.
Well, 3D's also had a little bit of a rep about being gimmickry. I mean, you also have to make a movie for your audience. In my case, it was tweens and teenage girls, and they wanted to see guitar picks fly in their face. I think if you were doing a Clint Eastwood movie, you wouldn't be doing a lot of gimmicks or breaking the fourth wall.
I would agree with that. So, Ken, talk a little bit about what's going on in the form of 3D advertising. I mean, we're here talking about 3D filmmaking, but we're seeing a lot of really exciting things going on in 3D advertising. And the interest and the excitement from the advertisers is really becoming a little bit of an impetus for filmmakers to rethink about if they're in the advertising space also.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're really at that fever pitch now, especially after CES and the effect that Avatar had at the box office. For NCM, being a cinema-situated advertising network, we're really sort of at the genesis of where 3D, I think, is going to sort of spawn. And I can tell you that we're definitely seeing not just the trades and all those picking up all the media, but we're also definitely seeing a bigger appetite from clients and advertising agencies as well. I think it is actually the stage of opportunity that Phil was mentioning earlier in the advertising business. Advertisers are finding ways that, I think first and foremost they're thinking of 3D as a gimmick. I hate to tell you that, but I think that is the truth. I think right now most of the 3D projects that have sort of embarked have been trying to lever that extra PR uptick that they can get off of launching a 3D sort of environment. Not that doesn't have its own merits. It is obviously a major advance in the visual presentation of products. But I think the long-term trends, and I think the best advertisers, I have a few examples that we'll show a little bit later, really understand that products are three-dimensional. I like that 3D to 2D interpretation you mentioned before. Products are typically three-dimensional. So this is another venue to really feature products and really show products in a different light and under a different sort of stage. And a lot of products are also very experiential, and I think that's one of the things that we're starting to find as we finesse the 3D science, that it really can deliver that deeper experiential feeling. So if you want to feel what it does feel like, the difference between, say, a first-class cabin and a coach cabin, this might be the type of venue that could actually, or the type of delivery mechanism that could actually do that. So I think there's a lot of really compelling long-term trends, obviously featuring products and experiential value, and then in the near term, I think we'll see a lot of, as the costs drop in the advertising environment, we'll see a lot of new advertisers and a lot of new production houses sort of enter the fray.
Yeah, part of your job though is the kind of that pre-show that happens in the theater. Yeah. So the challenge being is you're at this end of the row, everybody else is at this end of the row. If you screw up the pre-roll into the film, they get very upset, and if you don't create the right experience leading into their film. So talk about the advertising and how that pre-roll challenge is, because you're the lead-in that goes into these films.
That's a great tee-up. I am the chief creative officer of the company, so my responsibility is to make sure that the pre-show experience enhances the movie-going experience and is part of the bigger continuum. And that's always been important. When we shifted from sort of the static slides you guys all remember in the cinemas back in the 80s and the 90s to sight, sound, and motion, high-definition programming, programs like First Look, that sort of woke the consumer up, and suddenly the consumer is really tuning into our programming and understanding our advertising and the nature of our format. And right now, there probably isn't a more important time for us to step up and enforce that quality sort of control or that quality reinforcement. If you think about the total continuum of the movie-going experience, it can be 2 or 3 hours long. And if there are 3D ads running in the pre-roll or in the pre-show that are causing any kind of eye fatigue or nausea that early in the process, that is certainly not going to do the feature a service. So my job got a little more difficult in this respect, because I really do have to make sure that we keep that high quality focus on all the production. And it's the reason we've actually held off on our launch. We actually thought that we wanted to see some of the technology advance and make sure that there was a little bit better of a bedrock for us to work from, and reinforcing the technology and the production technique to make sure we're getting really good quality content.
Yeah, so I mean, this kind of is a perfect tee-up for Buzz, given the scars that you have on trying to do some of the early, everybody on this panel has got a long history of 3D, but you're now tasked with trying to help teach and educate the Sony filmmakers to think about how they do 3D to make sure that the best practices and the lessons learned and all the scars that you guys have built up over the years gets handed down. So talk a little about kind of what you've learned from the standpoint of where you were at and where you're at today, and also kind of, the whole storytelling perspective.
Having done all these pictures at ImageWorks, we've learned an awful lot. As Phil can attest, we're constantly learning things as we do pictures. People always refer to us as experts, and we look at each other like, are they talking about us? Because we're constantly learning things ourselves, and I think that's the greatest thing about
there
3D.
There are known knowns and unknown.
Exactly.
Whatever that was.
Exactly. And so, we've been working hard to make sure that what we think is the right way to make 3D movies is it's a multifaceted thing, because there's certainly the 3D storytelling aspect. There's also this sort of hidden layer of how do you make it comfortable to watch. Biggest concern we had on Beowulf was it was a 2-hour movie and it was for grown-ups, which grown-ups tend to experience eye fatigue quicker than kids do. And we had a director who was encouraging us to make it as deep as possible. So a lot of variables to factor in, but I think we've learned a lot. So since then, what we've done is we've crafted a whole course of study that's launching next month in Culver City. We built this center called the 3D Technology Center. It's a Sony corporate entity, but it's for the entire industry to partake of, because we want to start imparting what we've learned to help people avoid the pitfalls of getting into 3D so that they can make good 3D. Because essentially good 3D helps everybody. If you're all making good 3D,
Amen.
then it makes for better TVs, better Blu-rays, better longevity for the medium. And for those of us who work in it, it is not a gimmick. That's why we're here doing what we do, and we're trying to dispel that myth. So I'll just give you a quick overview of the kinds of things that we're going to be covering, because you'll see kind of the depth of what you need to know when you're doing 3D. We're starting our first extensive training with cinematographers in an intensive 4-day course of study that takes them all the way through the entire chain of events that happens, from the concept and fundamental side of how you plan the film to then the fundamentals of how cameras work in a virtual sense, what the production workflow looks like, how they previs these things. And then also we quickly get into the issues of how lighting might be affected in stereo. Now, strictly speaking, the lighting shouldn't be any different for two cameras. It's a technique difference, much like the Greg Toland school of directing the eye in the frame using lighting rather than what we've gotten used to since the 70s is using focus. Because that limited focus, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, is not the most effective way in 3D. So we talk about those lighting issues, but more importantly, we jump right into practical shooting tests. So at the 3D Technology Center, we have 3-reality camera rigs with the Sony F23 and 1500 and P1 cameras, all the state-of-the-art stuff, and sound stages for the DPs to go off and shoot with their crews. We also have extensive AC training, so they understand how these rigs go together and come apart, because these are the folks on the front line. They have to make sure that the production goes smoothly. So we're launching this effort, and then we're also showing them a little bit about the editorial and finishing side, but for the DPs, it's really about getting that practical experience. Then we're quickly jumping into the film and television director training, which is somewhat overlapping with this, because there are a lot of the core issues that are the same, and directors certainly need to know how cameras work and where to put them. It's more about the storytelling aspect, as a lot of folks have alluded to here. It's a very different medium, so it should be treated as such. And in the past, I think Phil and I have certainly done our share of 2D films with 3D versions, as opposed to the actual 3D stories, where people have thought about 3D from the get-go. So we're trying to get filmmakers and television makers to understand that this is a new tool in the arsenal that they can use. We're also then going into Steve's area a bit in terms of the live event work, because it's a very different medium. As he's alluded to, the cameras go in different places and you cut differently. Also, there's no post-production, and some of the issues with 3D, if you don't think about them, can really get you in trouble in real time. So we're doing extensive training for the live action crews to understand what are their options, and let them experiment with all these different options without the pressure of an actual set or an actual shoot. And then we are jumping into game developer training as well, because that's sort of the next big thing. I mean, the PlayStation this summer will be enabled for 3D with a simple firmware upgrade, and once you get your stereo television in your home, then 3D gaming is possible. So we want to make sure game developers are also doing a great job with knowing what the tools are that they have at their disposal. So training is a big thing for us, and so I've moved over from producing to training, because I think it's a really important thing to further the industry and make sure people know where to go to get their questions answered about it. So that's kind of the quick and dirty version.